Welcome to the Screen the Screener College Basketball Podcast with your hosts, Mike Randall and Gus Kearns.
Welcome, listeners, to the Screen the Screener College Basketball Podcast, where we're always talking everything college hoops. You could have been anywhere else on the dial, but you chose to be here with us, Mike and Gus, and we appreciate that. We're trying to give you your sports fix via sound wave through your speakers and your earbuds, since there's no college basketball to be consumed visually, sadly. Hope that you're enjoying the season recap series that we're pulling together for you, enjoying the storytelling and the keen insight that you are gathering from our guests that are plugged into particular programs. And this this episode is no different. We've brought in Lukas Harkins from Busting Brackets. You can give Lukas a follow on Twitter at Hardwired Sports. And if you're a college basketball fan, why aren't you doing that already? I mean, come on now. Lukas is an NCAA hoops expert. He writes, and he's a bracketologist over at Busting Brackets. He even just put out his way too early preseason top 25 for next season. He is also a media credential holder for Butler basketball, so the conversation is going to start there. And of course, if we're going to talk Butler, we have to talk the big shot maker and humble Kamar Baldwin and his greatness. We're going to talk a little bit of Coach Jordan and his style on the sidelines, but the conversation isn't just going to be limited to that. Lukas was kind enough to go ahead and broaden the spectrum a tiny bit on the college hoops conversation. He gives us a great team that might be a little bit underrated going into next season. He gives us a couple of players that you might need to pay attention to as possible player of the year candidates. We talk breakout players next year, and then we even dive into the NBA draft a smidgen, and he tells you who might be a person or a student athlete to pay attention to that might be taken late in the first round, and even a couple second rounders that he has his eye on. There are a couple of other things that we got to, but you're just gonna have to tune into the podcast and stay attached and listen into the end to find out what those goodies are. If you really like what you're listening to, please don't forget to give the podcast a follow on Twitter at FCS Podcast, efficiency of keystrokes, of course. Please don't forget to give Mike a follow over on his end at Randall Rant. He is insightful, entertaining, and educational, all in one beautifully wrapped little package that you would get as a surprise underneath a holiday tree. Please, if you really like what you're listening to and you're enjoying the season recap series that we're presenting to you, go over to your podcast consumption vehicle of choice and say nice things. Leave a nice review. Say nice things about our guests like Lukas or Jared Kotler or anybody else that we've had on recently to share these stories about these great programs. Kindness is always cool. We hope that you guys are staying calm, safe, and strong out there, and we hope that we're helping keep you company during that time. Thank you for tuning in, and glad we're able to do that for everybody out there. Let's get to that conversation with Lukas. Again, give Lukas a follow over at Hardwired Sports on Twitter. He's an unbelievable follow for any college basketball fan out there. Cheers. All right, welcome back in, listeners, to the Screen the Screener College Basketball Podcast. We're always talking everything college hoops, and we're trying to give you your sports fix, and we're going to do that twofold for this particular podcast. We brought in Lukas Harkins. You can follow him at Hardwired Sports. He is an NCAA hoop expert, writer, and bracketologist over at Busting Brackets. Lukas, thank you so much for joining the podcast. How's everything going over there?
Pretty good. Trying to stay healthy and safe. How about you?
We're holding up all right. We're trying to do the same, and that's been the sentiment of most of our guests, of just trying to keep our nose clean and stay out of everybody's way and stay healthy. You know, we've been focused on particular teams during recent podcasts, so let's start there. You are embedded with the Butler Bulldogs. It would be a massive squandering of time and resources on our part if we didn't also dance across the sport a little bit. Is that okay if we kind of play both sides of the fence here?
Perfect. Works for me.
All right, perfect. All right, let's start in your neighborhood. At one point this season, your Butler Bulldogs were in line for like a number one seed in the NCAA tournament after some massive wins like Florida, Stanford, Purdue, and then, you know, even a good loss, quote unquote, to Baylor, which was by 1 point. Once the season calmed down and started to find the finish line, Butler was sitting like 3, 4, 5, 6 range, somewhere in there, depending on what you're doing. Look into the crystal ball a little bit. Was this Butler team, a team that could do damage in March and make a deep run?
To me, I think the answer is yes. And not just saying that from a Homer's point of view. As a little background, I graduated from Butler almost a year ago to the day. I graduated in May. So, but I think there is room to make for damage in March, partially because I think the thing that pretty much everyone pictures when it comes to March Madness is who's going to be that guard that can carry a team on a deep run. And Butler had that in senior Kamar Baldwin, who made plenty of highlights throughout the season. Buzzer beater at game winner at Stanford, a buzzer beater at home against Villanova, I mean, he was and the game winner in his last collegiate game at Xavier. I mean, he's pretty much the man when it came down to crunch time. It was get him the ball, and Butler's probably got a good shot to win. Add that with the fact that heading into the tournament, Butler was probably the healthiest it had been since reaching the AP top 10. With Aaron Thompson coming back from injury, they were never going to get Christian David back after a torn ACL, but everyone was kind of coming back to clicking on the defensive end over the last couple games this season, and I think that was mostly due to getting healthier. So sitting on the 4 or 5 seed range, you're in a good place to make a run if you're hitting your stride again. Yeah, it's a team with 2 seniors leading the way, Baldwin and Sean McDermott. That's tough to not see them make a run.
Yeah, especially with McDermott shooting the ball as well as he started to shoot in the second half of the season. But you mentioned Baldwin, so let's go right there. He's one of my favorite players from this past season, and he was just one of the most consistent players in the nation over the past 3 years, like end of sentence. You talked about the game winners, but just how impactful was Baldwin this particular season, inside and outside of the huddle, on the practice floor and in the classroom? Oh, and maybe just talk about how impactful he was over his career for the Bulldogs. He's a true student athlete.
Yeah, I think that's the way to summarize it. I obviously haven't been all that around the sport as long as some people are, but in my time covering Butler, I don't think I've ever met someone as humble as Kamar Baldwin on the court and off the court. It's the kind of thing where I'd see him walking to class 2 days after a game, and he'd be like, "How are you doing today, sir?" Like, I'm a senior in college, and he's just like calling me sir on the sidewalk. I mean, he's an incredibly nice human, not just a basketball player. I mean, he kind of opened everyone's eyes at Butler when he hit a game winner as a freshman at home against Northwestern in non-conference play. And kind of from there, his lore as a player kind of grew. I think this season was particularly a really good culmination of his career. Like last year, he was the guy for the first time. Butler struggled, missed the tournament. He came back this year and was a better leader. The entire team just kind of clicked more than it did the year before. I think he's a big reason for that. His leadership on the court is obviously outstanding. He's an outspoken leader who almost seems to never get down.
Along with the leadership, like inside of the huddle, I mean, his performance outside on the court was something to be exemplified by every student athlete everywhere. And you can just imagine him setting a great example if you had like a mic on those handshake lines. You know, he was saying that exact same thing to every opposing player and every opposing coach that he mentioned to you, walking across campus during your senior year. Let's talk a little coach here. How about Coach Jordan? He found some comfort, success, and he has a foothold here at Butler now inside the tough Big East. What are some of the traits or the habits or the characteristics that allow Coach Jordan to uncover success in such a demanding league? He might challenge Coach Wright for best dressed coach on the sidelines too. He looks really smooth. Talk to us a little bit about Coach Jordan and just what makes him so successful on the sidelines for Butler.
Yeah, I think what's made him successful is in a sense, and I don't mean to sound this as overly cliche, is the Butler way, in quotes. I mean, I know that people kind of overstate the importance of the Butler way and that kind of stuff, but as it pertains to Coach Jordan, he played at the school, was an assistant at the school, coming back as the head coach. He knows what Butler's about, and he knows what was successful. So I think he knew coming in his second head coaching job after only spending 1 year at Milwaukee, he had a plan already. And I think for a young head coach in his first couple of years leading a program, I think that's been valuable for him, is just knowing what's worked, knowing what he's been around high major basketball as an assistant coach at Michigan and coaching underneath Brad Stevens, coaching underneath John Beilein, and he's had the success there. And I think pretty much Butler fans knew they were getting a guy who knew Butler and knew how to recruit. They weren't necessarily sure about his X's and O's stuff, but I think he's come into his own maybe this past season, exceeding expectations when Butler was picked 8th in the league. But I think in general, it's just he knows the program and he knows what's working with the program. The fan base is connected to him. He's a personable guy that players want to play for, and he has a great reputation for developing guards, which certainly helps for a program that had Kamar Baldwin this year. For the first 3 years he was on the sidelines.
I was going to say, and that doesn't hurt when you're playing inside of a league like the Big East that is just guard heavy and had literally some of the best players in the country this past year at the guard position, and Howard and Powell, and you can mention Baldwin and Tyshawn Alexander. All of those players are mentioned as some of the best guards in the nation. So if you're going to have a coach that's going to develop great guards in a league like the Big East, that's crucial.
Yeah, and I think that's part of what I think is so exciting for Butler fans about the future. 2 guards coming in next year that are top 200 guys, used to be top 150, and Miles Tate and Chuck Harris, and they're going to get to play a year alongside one of the guys who I think is one of the more underrated guards in the country, in Aaron Thompson, who's just an awesome leader and tremendous defender. So I think that's what's exciting for the program, and what Coach Jordan's been able to do is he's the guy, he's personable, he's the guy you really want to he's the guy you want to play for. And I've never had a bad interaction with him in 2 years of media. He's always gracious and willing to talk to people. Like I had a conversation with him my first year as a media member, which was my senior year. That was about just how to handle late game situations for 20 minutes, which is just something I wasn't expecting. I think that kind of speaks to his character as someone who's always willing to be open to talk to other people and develop relationships with his players and the people that follow his program.
I mean, I'm sure you were going into that conversation expecting like maybe a 30-second soundbite, and then you walk out of it 20 minutes later, like educated on what to do in a last-second situation as far as coming out of a timeout. That sounds like an amazing conversation. Wow. So with Baldwin,
I will say this though, because you asked about his dress. I've talked to Coach Jordan about how well dressed he is, particularly after the Villanova game. I will say he has given complete credit to his wife on that one, who sets out his outfit for the game.
So not only is he smart, but he's also really humble. I mean, the culture that's happening here at Butler is just streaming, through the players, like you mentioned with Kamar Baldwin, with Coach. Oh man, that makes sense. All right, so let's widen the lens a little bit here, Lucas. The Big East, we know, is already a grind. Powell and Howard, two of the best players in the nation, move on to the pros, but the league adds UConn and still holds some of the most historic programs in the nation. Butler included in that conversation, of course. So just how much more, clout and how much more stout does the league get with Coach Hurley and UConn, quote unquote, coming back home?
Yeah, I think on the surface, it's kind of a mixed bag. UConn hasn't been necessarily the UConn that we remember in the last couple of years, but it's still UConn. I mean, I'm 23 years old. Pretty much all I remember of UConn is like, oh, well, Kemba comes right to mind. Shabazz comes to mind. I mean, there's so much basketball history, even for young people like myself. And I think particularly with the way college basketball is trending, moving to a 20-game conference schedule makes a bigger difference. Adding UConn into the mix just makes an extra 2 games for every team in the conference to build their resume, build the potential to put themselves on the biggest stage in the NCAA tournament. And at the end of the day, that's really what it comes down to. For high major programs, the goal every season is to dance.
And it seemed like the Big Ten was a little bit ahead of the curve there as far as promoting that 20-game in-league schedule where almost every game is a quad 1 win opportunity. And it seems like the Big East is kind of replicating that a little bit and saying like, hey, if we can ourselves as a league, give ourselves an opportunity to get wins against each other that are going to help us in March and give us a higher profile, that makes perfect sense. And I guess we have to end, the Big East conversation with like DePaul. Lucas, are they ever going to be good? I mean, we were rooting so hard for them this year. We love Paul Reed. Is there hope out there for DePaul to find some success in the Big East?
I think that speaks to how poor DePaul has been. That just about everybody in the country was rooting for DePaul this year.
Yeah.
Like everyone was hoping for it. We turned the calendars over to 2020. It was looking like they had a really good team. Paul Reed was dominating the glass. Romeo Williams was doing his thing defensively. They had a bunch of nice wins in non-conference play. It just felt like it was the year. And if this wasn't the year, will there ever be a year? I think that's kind of what you're going with. And I just don't know.
I don't know either.
It feels like the pieces are there, but I don't think it'll ever really come together. Or at least not in my memory, and doesn't look like it's going to in the future either, especially with, as you mentioned, the Big East is only getting tougher.
If you're going to add a team like UConn and you already have it stacked with, 7-ish teams that are going to be, fighting for a March invite, and then you throw DePaul in there just like trying to claw to win any game they can.
We're not even just adding UConn. Like UConn's coming in just a few years after like Butler comes in, and those teams like a Butler and a Xavier, those kind of schools are just kind of just starting to pick up even their recruiting levels to where the rest of the conference is. Like Butler just a couple years ago was recruiting still at like an Atlantic 10 level.
Sure.
They have a top 35 class coming in this year with 4 top 200 recruits. Butler's been a program that's really built itself on underrated recruits. But if you add those kind of programs, adding higher level players from day one, the conference is getting internally better.
So Creighton in that conversation as well. Yeah, you're right. Good luck to Paul. We're rooting for you.
We are. The entire conference wants DePaul to be good. Correct. Because just as adding UConn makes the conference tougher, if DePaul's good, the conference is tougher.
All right, let's hit the transfer portal. It's packed. It's just jammed with people. Everybody's on the move. So we got a 2-part question for you here, Lucas. Give us one high-impact transfer that you kind of have your eyes on where you think it's a good fit for the player, a good fit for the student athlete, and a good fit for the program for next season. And then we'll get to the second part of the question. What do you think of the NCAA waiving the sit year for the upcoming year for all transfers due to the current world-changing situation? So give us your one player that you think is just going to be a great fit in the program because of where they're going and because of what kind of student athlete they are, and then maybe give us your larger thoughts on the transfer rule in general.
I think with a high-impact transfer for next year, I actually looked at someone who sat out last year in Sam Hauser. Notable shooter, enough size to play on D. He's going. Obviously, Virginia has a ton of talent, great coaches. They're still the defending national champions.
Excellent point, by the way. Excellent.
Ended this past season kind of rolling, trending towards a top 5 seed, kind of out of nowhere, and that kind of is a testament to Virginia having so many youngsters that kind of got it going, or first-year players in the program that got it going. Heading into this season, they bring a lot of stuff back. And while people will say that it's tough for a first-year player in the program to succeed at Virginia, I think that's what the value of Hauser sitting out last year will be. He's accustomed to Coach Bennett's system at this point. He'll step in. He can be a shooter in their offense, kind of both as a screener and as a shooter. And I think having a year to develop defensive skills under that leadership, he's going to be such an impact player right away for a team that I think can compete for the national title.
I don't think that's crazy talk to say, especially if you're going to bring in somebody that's impactful on the offensive end for a program that values possessions and really puts emphasis on making each offensive possession really efficient. So if you're going to have an efficient shooter that's going to join the program and learns all the defensive concepts that go along with the pack line, that makes perfect sense. But give us your view on where you're at with do we need to waive this thing for more than 1 year? Should transfers just have freedom to go wherever they need to? Or like you mentioned with Hauser, and we can visit Gonzaga and other places that really benefit from their student athletes sitting out a year. Is this sit-out year profitable for the student athletes and for the program?
Yeah, I mean, I think you hit on it with the freedom that comes with it for players, and I think that's important to value. So I think that's the issue with it. It's depends how you look at it. I value the ability to have a transfer to have the waiver because I think it's important to have if you're stuck in a situation that you're not feeling like you're being able to maximize yourself as a student or an athlete or as a student athlete. Right. Being able to make that change, I value, but I can certainly see from the other side of how it really changes the way the entire college basketball can look, as there's almost like a free agency some off seasons with how things work. And I think some programs will still use a redshirt year. I think, if I'm thinking off the top of my head, right, Trey Murphy is heading to Virginia this year. Even if the rule is waived, he's planning on sitting out and redshirting. And I think that those kind of programs, as we've already talked about Virginia, and you've kind of hit on how successful Gonzaga has been with transfers, the kind of programs that value sitting out a year, I think will still use that to their benefit. I
guess the follow-up question there, and we'll go a little bit off script here. Do you think that that's one of the things that influenced the mass exodus from the Ivy this year? With Seth Towns and Bryce Aiken and Mike Smith, Yale were transferring as well. Yeah, Brunner. So do you think that the Ivy needs to adjust their transfer rule or their sit-out rule where they can allow their student athletes to play that one more year instead of all of them getting their degree and then going to play somewhere else?
That's intriguing. I haven't really given that thought before. For most things, I would say I agree with what the Ivy does because I always just thought they were smart.
Right.
but
it's a good default there. I like that.
I can't say I really thought too far into that one.
We were talking transfer, so I just figured to bring it up. Okay, let's something that we're very sure of. You wrote down, and and documented very clearly. We have an early top 25 ranking over at bustingbrackets.com. Please go check out Lucas's stuff over there online, bustingbrackets.com. He's got a top 25 ranking. We know this is very fluid with the NBA draft decision. We just talked about the transfer elements involved. There's a lot of calculus that goes into these rankings.
I wasn't good at calculus.
Well, luckily there's no report card for this podcast. So who's one program that you are higher on than maybe the consensus for next season? A team that you feel like has the right recipe of student athletes coming in, returning student athletes, coaching staff, sustainability, and just a culture, a team that might be sneaky great next year.
Give me Arkansas. I really like the combination of things that Arkansas has. Even it seems like Mason Jones is heading to the NBA draft. I do think Isaiah Joe will be back, though, and that gives them a ton of scoring coming back, in addition to just bringing in a lot of talent. Vance Jackson, Jalen Tate, two really good additions from the transfer market, and I love their recruiting class. I think there's at least a couple guys that can make an impact right away. Moses Moody's a 4-star, top 50 recruit, kind of shoots the lights out, fits their system, runs the pace. KK Robinson, same kind of concept at point guard. I just like a lot of pieces there, and add that to the fact that Eric Musselman has done such a good job implementing newcomers during his coaching career. And I just like the culture he's bringing there. High energy, high pace, really fun. I think that's something that newcomers can buy into quickly and be successful right away.
Well, be thankful, or maybe not if you want to argue a little bit, but my co-host Mike Randall would maybe argue with you on the Musselman concept of your idea here. He's not a believer of him as an X and O coach on the sideline, especially, in late game situations. So he might have a little craw at with you about that particular one, but I love what they have coming back too. I think Joe is going to be one of the best scorers in the nation. I can see him having a Powell or Marcus Howard type season, especially inside the SEC. And, since we're talking players, let's go national. Who's one returning player, Lucas, that you think is going to perform at that high level, like a Marcus Howard or a Powell or Luka Garza, that is coming back? We know that he's going to be returning, and just one guy that you think is going to be a stud and be on everybody's, first or second team All-America list.
Well, I think you said it already. I mean, Luka Garza, I think, is going to come back and be that guy.
Okay, sure.
Kind of basically in that conversation as a National Player of the Year type player this year coming back. I'd throw Petrusev in that from Gonzaga. Maybe a guy that I think is a little underrated because of how much people value Creighton's kind of balance with Tyson Alexander and Mitch Ballack. I really like Marcus Zagorowski. I think he's that kind of guy for me. Maybe one of the best players in the Big East next season, leader of a team that maybe people aren't necessarily pegging for their top 10 anymore with Alexander gone. A lot of people will give Villanova that credit, but I think, which rightfully, Jay Wright and Colin Gillespie, that team's awesome. Really like Zagorowski at Creighton as one of those guys too.
And how about this? We'll test, what you have under the covers there and what you have hidden in your back pocket. Who's one under the radar player that you think is just going to explode on the national view and on the national scene? We'll pull a parallel here. Who's going to be the Obi Toppin of this season where you're like, he's good, but is he going to be like player of the year, first team All-America good? Who's one person, one student athlete with further opportunity and playing time that you think is going to explode that the listeners really need to pay attention to next season?
Well, I think part of it is for this player that I have in mind is a jump in visibility. And that's James Bouknight at UConn. He had a really solid freshman year. I think he's ready for a huge boom, playing in a bigger conference in the Big East alongside, playing against teams like Villanova and Creighton who are entering the year as top 15 type teams. He's going to be up against top competition. They're going to see him. He's an outstanding athlete, can kind of do it all. He's my guy for that. Although I do like the idea of a potential breakout season from Will Richardson at Oregon.
Okay, well, I'll tell you right now, I'm kind of on board with you with Bouknight because I think during the last 10 games of the season, that guy, he averaged like 18 points a game. He kind of, quote unquote, figured it out. It wasn't just like, a chuck and duck situation. It was like, I'm going to take smarter shot situation. So I'm totally with you on Bouknight. I think that's a great call personally. I think that if you're going to pay attention to where players are going and who might be the next player to pay attention to. A couple of players that we thought we were going to pay attention to in our sport decided to go to the G League. So we saw Jalen Green, Isaiah Todd head to the G League and not heading to college next season. I mean, we saw it this past season with LaMelo Ball and Hampton going to play overseas and skipping a year of college. So I guess, Lucas, the question is, does the G League own a new model for like the past one and done players like Zion? And does college hoops suffer as a result of this new model that the G League is presenting?
Well, I think it's opened up a new avenue at the very least. Like we saw LaMelo Ball, RJ Hampton go play overseas last year. I think that makes sense to provide that kind of avenue for a top-rated player. But I think in terms of how it matters for college hoops, I don't think it's as big of an issue as some people have really made it out to be. Part of that for me is I just think people overvalue how much the casual college basketball fan pays attention to recruiting. When it comes to not following just your own team, like I grew up a Wisconsin fan. I'm from Wisconsin. Wisconsin's not exactly a team that was pulling in top-rated recruits. I loved college basketball, but I couldn't tell you the year before when I was 14 who's going to be this guy I'm really looking forward to. And I was a Bucks fan, so I was used to watching the top prospects. But even then, I don't think it really affects college hoops all that much because, even look at the best storylines of this past season. You see Obi Toppin. Well, he wasn't going to take that route. Luka Garza probably coming back for another season.
Marcus Howard.
Exactly. Miles Powell. You look at those kind of teams, even San Diego State this year with Malachi Flynn. There's so many good storylines every year that don't necessarily pertain to who the top prospects are. I think people are maybe blowing this a bit out of proportion because of how awesome Zion was. He was so awesome and it was so recent that it's in people's minds that he basically dominated a year of college basketball. But it's possible we see that even with this avenue. You look just a few more years ago, and Trae Young was top 30, but might not have been a guy who would take that avenue. He might not have been even considered a full-on one and done before he took the court in Oklahoma and just shot the skin off the ball. And basically made everyone love his potential.
I think with 353 college programs playing Division I basketball, there's going to be that Trae Young story where you have the top 50 recruit, not the top 5 recruit, that just kind of explodes on the league and explodes on the national scene, and you're going to fall in love with that guy anyway. And we just can't predict who that guy is going to be every single year. That'd be silly to try to predict who that student athlete's going to be. And that's the beauty of the sport, because there's just so much opportunity across the nation for that to exist, especially with so many of the leagues being so visible now on television, on multiple platforms, whether it be Fox or ESPN or CBS or otherwise.
Part of it is the way fans dedicate themselves to college basketball. There's so many college basketball fans that are alma mater fans. They went to West Virginia. I'm a West Virginia fan. I'm going to watch West Virginia every time they play, no matter what. And I think that there's that kind of fan loyalty that this kind of model doesn't really affect as much.
Totally agree, because they are not going to root for the name on the back of the jersey. They're going to root for the name on the front of the jersey. You are totally spot on there, Lucas. That's a great call.
Yeah, when I was growing up, I was a Dallas Mavericks fan in addition to being a Bucks fan because Devin Harris went to Wisconsin.
That makes perfect sense, right? Devin Harris had a great career. He played for the Nets for a little while, so we're based in New Jersey, so we got to see him at the latter part of his career.
Now the Mavericks, I have that red alternate Nets jersey.
Very good. There it is.
Somewhere in my closet.
That's great. I'm glad we can make that come together. And speaking of the NBA, hopefully it's going to happen in June. And my daughter and I just watched the WNBA draft and watched Sabrina go number 1. The NFL draft is ongoing over the weekend for multiple days. Lucas, provide the listeners with a first rounder for the NBA draft who you think is vastly underrated. And we'll just, use Brandon Clark as our example.
A wonderful example, I might add.
I'm so glad that he exploded the way that some people predicted that he would on both ends of the ball. Who do you think's that one underrated rookie that's going to go in the first round, maybe later first round, who's going to have a major impact?
So I'll take this two ways. I'll say it as impact as a rookie and impact as a maybe down the road kind of guy. For impact right away, I look at Villanova's Sadiq Bey. I think he falls in that latter half of the first round to a team that's competing along the playoff push, kind of good size, good athleticism, plays defense, can shoot the three, good catch and shoot guy, just kind of an instant rotation player for a playoff team. which I think is really valuable. Number 2, Kira Lewis out of Alabama is just so lightning quick with the ball. He's still super young, even though he's played 2 years in college. I think he's still 19. I think he's going to be another second half of the first round kind of potential buy that I really like.
Lewis's athleticism and just his end-to-end speed with the ball are borderline breathtaking. And you're right with Bay. Bay is going to fall to one of those teams that they can just plug him in for 10 minutes and he's going to make a couple threes, defend multiple positions, and buy into the system because that's what they do at Villanova. And it's going to be an easy sell and he's going to fit right into whatever team takes him down in the 20s. I'm totally with you on that. Lucas, let's take a second round pick. Let's dive really deep into the draft here. Who's one of those guys that maybe we've kind of quasi followed all season this year, declared for the draft or as a senior, that's going to get picked in the second round, that you think really has high value and is going to be overlooked and not get picked where maybe he should be?
Well, one of the things I think with overlooked prospects is it's maybe not the guy you followed that much during the year. From a high major standpoint, I'd point to Desmond Bain out of TCU. Kind of a late second round guy, catch and shoot. I think he's a really good passer. I think he has good vision. Maybe not a best creator, but already pretty well built for the NBA game. He does a lot of things well. Obviously, I'm more of a guard guy than a big, so I kind of lean towards those types of players as my sleepers. But I really like Desmond Bain. And then for the mid-ranger rank, Grant Riller from Charleston, I really like.
Great call.
I might even take him at the edge of the first round. I think he's really fun. He gets to the basket well, can shoot from 3. Kind of guy that goes overlooked because you didn't really watch him play, and he didn't make the tournament this year, obviously. So he would have been kind of that guy that maybe explodes for taking Charleston to a Sweet 16 if that would have happened. And he never got that opportunity. So
correct. And who watches the CAA besides me? I'm a JMU guy. So I was totally locked into Riller, during his whole career kind of. And you mentioned how Bain was built. Riller is put together as well. And he had a little bit more responsibility this year, having some point guard responsibilities and some duties. So he's not just coming in as a shooter. He's coming in as a real basketball player who can do multiple things, whether it be handle the ball, shoot the lights out, or maybe even help out a little bit on the defensive end. I really like Riller in that spot as well. I'm totally on board with you as far as Riller goes. A little love to the CAA. Not bad. All right. And finally, let's just circle this conversation back around for you, Lucas, and with Butler. Let's talk something positive and something that people can contribute to. And let's talk a little bit about Project 44. You can hit project44.org. And what's the traction and the passion associated with such the powerful story that your program has taken hold of and really made a national thing, college basketball scene?
Yeah, it's really a great story. I mean, Project 44, which is named after Andrew Smith, who played for Butler in the early 2010s. War number 44, hence Project 44. He received a bone marrow transplant in November 2015, and then died a few months later after 2 years with cancer. So it's kind of a moving story that's then transitioned into Project 44, which I want to say the goal initially was to save 44 lives with bone marrow transplant. And that's since expanded. I think the program was launched in 2016. I was in college for the last few years, so every year we had a Project 44 game. Andrew's wife Samantha comes to the games, talks about it. Chase DeGaulle played for Butler. Big part of the program. I would definitely come through. It's obviously made a huge impact on Butler as a school and as an institution. And I think for anyone who's interested in it, you already said it, project44.org to learn more about it and reach out.
Well, look, if you're looking to do something good or spread some kindness, that might be a place for you guys to hit, especially if you might have a couple of extra seconds on your time when you're spending at home and maybe look at the screen. Maybe that's the site that you look at on your screen. Lucas, let's get you out of here on 3 fun ones. We'll go with our 3 T questions. Okay. Tastes, trusts, and tunes. Help the listeners out. Best craft beer or brewery that we need to know about that's in the neighborhood of Hinkle Fieldhouse.
Oof. You hurt me here because even though I'm from Wisconsin, I'm not really an alcohol drinker. So I can't really give you much on that process. I mean, if you're going to Hinkle Fieldhouse, though, we used to have a Scotty's Brew House right on campus. That's no longer there. I believe it's been replaced by a Chatham Tap. I'm never on that side of Hinkle, but Chatham Tap is right across the street from Hinkle Fieldhouse, so it's kind of the place to go if you're going to the game. I would suggest like parking in the garage there, just kind of stopping by. It's a downtown place, but they moved a location right to Butler's campus. So I would say that's probably the place to go if you're sticking right at campus. It's right across the street. You can see it from the front of Hinkle.
Now that is a scouting report right there. Well done, Lucas. Okay, trust. Anywhere you want to go in the nation, Lucas, who's one player in the nation that you trust from this past season with a last-second possession to win the game with the game on the line, whether it's to make a game-winning shot or a game-winning decision?
I mean, this almost isn't fair. I mean, I would be it would be a heretic to not say Kamar Baldwin for this answer.
Good man, there you go.
You can't. I mean, basically, for the last 4 years, I've always felt you get Kamar the ball and you let him go, and something good almost always happens.
Listen, there's nothing wrong with that. I kind of felt like you would go there, but I just want to see if you would, diversify a little bit and go off script. But thankfully, you said Kamar Baldwin. I love Kamar as well. I mean, he's one of the best let game closers that we had this past season. You can throw, you can throw Peyton Pritchard in there, Jalen Crutcher from Dayton. But anytime you give up to one of those three players, why not? And Tunes.
Yeah, I'd throw Geo Baker into the mix too.
Say that one more time.
I'd throw Geo Baker into the mix, and I think that's my top 4 of clutch performers of the past year.
Geo Baker, shot maker. That's what we like to call him in Jersey. All right, Tunes, what have you been listening to music-wise or podcast-wise while you're longing for the return for sports, Lucas?
Good question. I can't say I've listened to as much music as I've used to. Not really sure why. I think I've been at home maybe a little bit more TV than music. But, I mean, naturally, my text tone on my phone is still the March Madness theme song, so I'll get that every once in a while.
Nice.
But I guess I've had it for a couple of years. I couldn't believe I found it, and it stayed. I guess from artists, I've always been a John Bellion fan. I've seen him twice. He's kind of my go-to as far as listening to an artist while I'm writing. Maybe I'll throw Bryce Vine into the mix. I really like him, kind of throughout college. He was kind of an artist that we listened to a lot. It's going to change, though. We're nearing summer, which means it's almost time to switch to country music for a while. So it's an ever-changing endeavor for me. I'll say that. I've always been a big music fan. I picked up guitar when I was, 8 or 9. So I've always been really into a lot of different types of music. So my style kind of changes based on the time of year.
Well, I like that your ears are evolving to the seasons. That kind of makes me happy in some fashion. I'm not even sure why that works, but that sounds like a perfect scenario and a perfect package. You're changing your music.
I don't think I listen to country music 9 months a year. It just never comes up unless I can roll a window down.
I love that Mother Nature is influencing what you listen to. That's fantastic. All right, Lucas, thanks so much for talking some college hoops here on the podcast. We hope you and the listeners out there stay safe, stay calm, stay strong. We just want to say cheers, cilantro, grazie. Thank you so much for providing some college hoops talk for the listeners out there and for us. We really appreciate it, man.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. I hope you guys are staying safe and healthy as well.
Perfect. Cheers.